But you could not have pure love or even pure lust nowadays. No emotion was pure because everything was mixed up with fear and hatred. Their embrace had been a battle, the climax a victory. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act. Ordinary, everyday acts have become nothing less than revolutionary. I know we lean really hard on the Honorable Mr. Blair here, but he spoke a lot of truth in his limited time on this earth. We could tap into Animal Farm, we could tap into 1984, but you guys already know the metaphor. You've heard the rant a million and one times. There's no need to bore you with it. But at its core, the purity of love, or even lust, or especially truth, has gotten mixed up with fear and hatred. And what is at the center of fear and hatred but lies? You guys may have seen the meme I posted earlier this week. Breitbart said that politics is downstream from culture. Well, if our culture, and one could hardly argue that it is not, if our culture is in fact now downstream from the father of lies, what do you suppose that implies about our politics? Thou canst not serve both God and mammon. Now, serving the interests of the world, serving the interests of mammon, doesn't always equate to bowing down at the temple or signing up with the pedophile order or Klaus Schwab or any of the obvious darkness. Sometimes it's just the simple lies, and sometimes it's just the simple act of not pushing back against false narratives. Example number one, the horrors that are befalling the Palestinians in Gaza. Image after image being generated to generate sympathy for those poor occupied people. I mean, here, well, side of an Israeli bombing. Here, a dead body on the side of a road, victim of your tax dollars, Israeli cluster bomb shrapnel. Here, the war crime of white phosphorus over hospitals. Here, a charred body inside a burned building. And here, a poor, lifeless, tattered corpse. What a horrible way to die. Oh, wait. I haven't been entirely honest with you. You see, only the first one actually came out of Gaza. The remaining ones, this dead body, this war crime use of white phosphorus, this charred body, and this wrecked, torn piece of flesh, were all ethnic Russians in the eastern region of Donbass. Where is the sympathy being generated for them? Liars often figure, figures often lie. We could go on the rant about propaganda ministries and everything, but when the wool is being deliberately pulled over your eyes and you are making no effort to enlighten yourself and dig deeper, this is where the fear, the hatred, and the lies take root. Now, I make no moral judgments on any of these things, including this one from Gaza or any of the horrors that took place in Israel as a result of the Hamas raid. This is war. This is war by its very nature, and war is horror by its very nature. Seeing playgrounds full of laughing children reduced to tattered chunks of wet, screaming flesh. Does it matter what side you're on? If you're not one of the participants, they use these lies, they use this fear to sell you the narrative. Scripture speaks of it in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 9. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall perish. So why? Why do we watch these liars walk between the raindrops with no accountability? Why? Because we know what they serve. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning. Sound like an instrument of war? He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And since we are talking about Gaza momentarily, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just throw this in. I won't rehash it. I'll leave that for you to dig deeper on. Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, for those evangelicals who have been sold a bill of goods and assured of our moral high ground. But moreover and always, the root is fear. And just like the father of lies, what do we know about fear? Fear is a liar. So when they lie, and when they push that fear, that is the time that we all have to reach deep, that we all have to dig deeper, that we have to read between the lines. And when we pray, pray for discernment and pray for clarity to overcome the fear and to distinguish truth from lies. Because the fundamental command is to walk in truth. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors. And I cannot stress this enough as the turnaround is winding down. Certainly not employers. Don't even think about doxing me. We got too many Trump stickers in the parking lot. They have been adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind. They are guaranteed to stretch open that gaping liar's maw and choke them to death with throbbing, oozing, turgid truth cock. Ugh. It could be the testosterone talking, maybe the caffeine. Don't take it at arm's reach. Welcome back, boys and girls. It is time once again for the Sunday sermon. I think we may actually have decent Wi-Fi signal. Finally got that straightened out. If you could have seen me in the panic, scrambling to make go time. We're all in. Everybody in for the drum roll. Where's everybody at? Coming hard charging out of the starting gate, as we do with every sermon, the bumper music from the band Red Desert, a gut-stomping rock and roll band from the once great American city, now the smoldering ruins and burning embers of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The name of the band is Red Desert. The name of the track is Older No Wiser. Every time I do one of these, I get a little bit older. Every time I do one of these, you guys get to decide if I've gotten any wiser. Some weeks I do better than others. How about we jump in here and do a quick roll call, see which one of the usual suspects are already on board. Goodness gracious, we got a ton of comments on here. Man, I'm going to have a hard time. I think we got a bigger turnout than we've had in several weeks. Did you guys miss me? I don't want to puff my own pecker here, but hey, this is very flattering when everybody shows up. Got Brother Roman from opiumtales.com. And, of course, my quote historian, Neil Ross, who Roman actually introduced me to. We got Brother Joey. What do we got? Hola, Brother Roman. Hello, Joey. Good to have you on board. Let's see who else we got. Hondo Wade. Good evening. Brother, you made it. You made it. I am honored. Let me see who else we got. We got Brother Neil. We got the original Sinner Sister herself, Miss Emmy, the divine Miss Emmy. So happy to see you here, Brother Ryan Jenkins. Oh man, Ryan, I meant to tell you, there is a guy that I'm working with on this turnaround who worked with you briefly on a turnaround down in Houston back in the day. I want to give you the post-sermon phone call. We'll catch up on all of that. But yeah, man, I mentioned your name because I was like, hey, man, this is my bro that got me into this whole crane game. And he was like, oh, yeah, Ryan, I worked with him down in Houston. Anyway, we'll get you caught up on that. It's a small world with the Brotherhood of the Hook. Anyone in Arizona? What are you doing in Arizona, man? Brother Dennis Weimer, one of my oldest and dearest friends, going all the way back. Dennis could actually tell you some stories, as could Roman, about the time that I actually ran for mayor of Houston down in 1991. Actually obtained 67 write-in votes. It was basically a bad joke that spiraled completely out of control, and the next thing you know, I found myself on the ballot. It was the craziest thing. Another one of those hashtag True Bart stories. I know you guys enjoy those. Let me see who else we got on board. Just scrolling through real fast. All of the usual suspects have arrived, and of course, the lovely Miss Carrie down there with Brother Roman, opiumtales.com. Happy to have you guys on board. Just about missed it. The mighty, mighty Stone. Brother, good to see you, man. Good to see you, and it's always good when you get some interaction. You've been laying a little low, a little bit quiet. I've been worried about you, praying on you a little bit. Hope things are going well for you. You know how to reach me if you need to. And of course, Deacon Mark. Yeah, you can snivel about technicalities. Well, technically, now Bart has spoken. It's Deacon Mark. That is your moniker from here on, brother. Accept it. Deal with it. Honored to have you on board, man. And I'm looking forward to the next time I'm able to see you once I'm down in Jacksonville, Texas with Brother Sonny again. We got David on board. Good to see you, man. Tom Hollyby, another fellow denizen of the gray and cold Pacific Northwest. I'm going to be back up there in about a week and a half. Might even take a little trip over the pass and come and see you. Or even if I'm just passing through, maybe we can just get together for a cup of coffee, because, we are the most caffeinated region on the planet. Brother Wayne Sharp, who I go all the way back to high school with, man. Always good to see you, man. Get Larry on board. I haven't seen your brother Larry in quite a while. I'm starting to worry about him. Turtle, brother. Glad to have you here. Hopefully, there will be something in here that you can take away, something to bring you a little guidance, a little strength. I always love to deliver, man. Always love to deliver. Let me see if I missed anybody. I think that covers everyone. You should run again. I think I would be killed in Blue City, Houston. I think I would be killed. So let's go ahead and we'll crank down the bumper music, man, and we'll jump on into this thing. I got to tell you guys, this one I'm really pretty much completely winging it. I had my bullet points, and then I looked at it, and it was just the structure just wasn't lending itself to the point that I wanted to make. So I know you guys will bear with me on that. You guys have always been patient on that. Those of you who have been around for a while, man, you can remember when I first started doing this thing way back in the day, early part of 2020, in the middle of the so-called pandemic, when it was, as Ryan correctly and derisively referred to it, when it became the COVID cast. It was me and a phone. It literally was me and a phone sitting on a stand where this camera is right now. And I have done the straight on camera shot. I did that for a while, but I kind of dig this vibe because it's reminiscent of the early days when it literally was just me and the phone, and just ranting and raving and getting my opinions out there. Remember, guys, I'm no guru. I am just, I'm a crane operator with some opinions. I'm a fat, toothless cripple trying to make it in the world and trying to offer my example as I walk in the light, and hopefully something that I will have to offer will touch one of y'all in some way or another. Speaking of items of faith, Sender Sister Emmy, December the 2nd is a service of holy closure for my church. If anyone is interested in seeing how ELCA closes a church officially, I would love to see you guys there. Hopefully, my friends of faith down in the Houston area can make it out for that. Contact Emmy, get in touch with her. I would love to make it through. And to check that out. You do so much better winging it. Not to puff your considerable pecker or anything, Ryan, but you really have been a source of a lot of guidance on that. You are always one to check me and keep me honest no matter what. And every time you've given me advice on how to steer this thing, how to do the approach, how to, just kind of get the essence of Bart, because you know me on a much deeper level than most of these people. You know when the honesty and the integrity is coming through, and you have a perspective that a lot of other people don't have in my delivery. And every time you have advised me on that, it has worked out to my benefit and for the benefit of the sermon, and therefore for the audience. So thank you. for all of that and for everything, I can't say enough good things about Brother Ryan, man. I'm really happy to have somebody like that in my life. You guys see what I'm sporting? Deus Vult MFers. Is it insensitive? Yes. Is it borderline sacrilege? That's really going to be in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? But it delivers the message in a way that is very Bart's. Deus Vult, of course, the old Crusader war cry, God wills it. And if you stand in the way, that's when you get the old classic Reverend F bomb, which, if you guys have noticed, I've been much, 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 much better about using the F bomb as punctuation. Why? Because Ryan, that same Brother Crane operator that I was telling you about, who I worked with up in Salt Lake City and I'm now working with down here in Borger, Texas, is a man of faith. He stays out of the limelight. I will not out him on this program except to thank him for his quiet support. But he pointed out, he was just like, he was like, man, you really, really deliver the message. You could probably stand the curse a little less. And of course, my initial reaction was predictable. Hey, fuck you, but I really started thinking about it. And with the perspicacity and pompous verbosity with which I am possessed, and the verbal acumen and Dennis Miller-esque vocabulary and historical acumen, there's no need. There's no need. I will occasionally drop an F-bomb if I am trying to really, really drive a point home. But when I was leaning on it like a crutch, I felt convicted. I'm not above it. I'm not trying to do this high and mighty thing. It's like, y'all need to stop your cussing, man. That ain't Jesus like. I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just saying that it was a weakness on my part. I watch these videos sometimes when I review it, mostly because I'm in love with the sound of my own voice. No, that's partially true. But I try to refine my communication skills, particularly now that I am feeling called. So the pregnant pauses and the uhs and the ers and the F bombs as punctuation stuff, I'm trying to clean it up. And, guys, feel free if there's ever something, because Ryan will just let it all hang out, man. Ryan could give two flying farts at 6 rolling donuts. He does not care. He will let me know in the middle of a thread, in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of an awkward social situation, hey, man, this is wrong. You need to clean this up. You could be doing this better. Some of you guys either that's not your vibe or you really don't feel like you have the luxury or whatever. But listen, I will never be above constructive criticism. If there's anything that you guys offer that you think, hey, Bart, here's something you might not have looked at. I really dig what you have going on. Or even if you hate what I got going on, and just be like, you know what, scrap it, give up. If that's your constructive criticism, cool. I mean, you know what you can do with that. But if you've got something constructive and you think that you can dial me in a little bit better and make me a more effective vessel, make me a more effective communicator for the message that I'm trying to deliver, then please, by all means, contact me privately, or hell, call me out publicly. Again, I am not above it. I am not above it at all. So thank you for all who have done that. Venture forth and fornicate thyself. That's freaking brilliant, man. All right, so let me go with it here. We're going to drop that one on first. That's the first banner we're dropping. Again, now it's just me and a laptop, so I got my production screen over here, and it'll be fine. A couple of quick sponsor shout-outs, of course. Brother Roman and his lovely wife Carrie, and Roxy and Allie, and the bevy of beautiful women over at opiumtales.com. Don't forget, get on Amazon, buy his book. It's, if you want to bump up your art skills and see where he got to the point where he's doing the beautiful watercolor work of beautiful naked women, and beautiful women are seeking him out to paint pictures of them, get his book. We covered it all in a big interview. He was my first remote guest. We are going to be doing more remote guests, by the way, and I've got a couple of big ones coming up, hopefully before the end of the year, and I think you guys are really going to dig it. There will be no sermon next week because that is probably going to be the last week of the shutdown, and I will be traveling. But after that, I should be back in Spokane doing it consistently on the weekly, and then we can get some guests on and we can really bump this thing up. Tearing through the holidays. So anyway, big shout out to Roman and the bevy of beautiful women at opiumtales.com. Go check out the book. One of my oldest and dearest friends, beautiful watercolors of beautiful naked women and testosterone-driven commentary. Where do you go wrong with that? Also, my Viking brothers, and I got to give a shout out to Casey and Dusty Tellison. Casey, by the way, passed the bar. He is an active lawyer. If you are in the Spokane area and you need an attorney, put the man on retainer. Seek him out. He approaches the law with the same tenacity with which he approached being a machine gunner in the Marine Corps in a combat zone. And you should check out his book as well. Freaks of a Feather, which is published by Latop Press out of Spokane, Washington. In any case, my Viking brothers, Casey and Dusty Tellison, Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. Hey, but what about sit down, shut up, you're wrong. Nordic Smoke freaking Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. And I am making it home in time for the holidays. The tradition has continued since 2014, every single year that I've been in the Inland Northwest. They have smoked the holiday bird, sometimes birds, plural, for the Bart Bunker Thanksgiving, and I'm going to be back in time to do it. They were cool enough. Oh my goodness. I could tell you the story about the time that I was stuck down in Texas over the holidays, and they still managed to get that holiday bird down to me. It was the most beautiful thing, and it arrived in a box that was marked for those like pre-prepped meals. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like I didn't order commercial meal prep. And I open it up and boom, there is the bird with all the fixings packed in the dries. It was just a magnificent thing. They're great people. They put out a great product, and they're dear friends of mine as well. So big shout outs to Roman at opiumtales.com, and of course Casey and Dusty Tellison over at Nordic Smoke Barbecue. There you go. Here we go. Dork to Pimp Daddy by Roman Reba. Only $10 on Kindle. Lots of instruction, and it's guaranteed to be fun. You know, I have known Roman forever, and I watched every artistic pursuit of his since 1988. Whether it was guitar or piano or visual arts or any of the things that he's done, man, he's a really creative dude, and he's been a very, very solid friend for decades. So go over there and pick up that book, and also Freaks of a Feather from Casey Tellison, both available on Amazon. If you can make it, Emily, I know absolutely nothing about Lutherans. I don't say you know absolutely nothing about Lutherans, because you know about Martin Luther, and we could probably go on at length about that. So, what do you say we jump into this thing? Of course, the banner is getting ready to change now. We are going with our ever popular segment, Ryan's Rabbit Hole. That's right. The accolades, the thunderous roar of applause. Yes. Everyone's favorite. Ryan in the rabbit hole. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please, people. Hey. I'm so happy to have the sound effects back on the board now so I can play around with that stuff a little bit. Anyway, guys, you already know about the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole is something we do. One of the things that Ryan and I first bonded over is we were both repositories of useless information, and we can carry on conversations about damn near anything. So every week we go down the rabbit hole, and we take it out of your comfort zone, expose you to some historical individuals, historical periods, esoteric knowledge, things that you might not, and in all likelihood have not been previously exposed to. And we always kind of diverge off the beaten path a little bit. Sometimes it dovetails with the stuff that we're talking about. Sometimes it does not. This one kind of does, kind of doesn't, but we're not going to worry too much about it. Sometimes we go historical. Sometimes we go conspiratorial. Sometimes we go esoteric. That's when Ryan really decides to make me work for it. And today we're going historical. Your search term is, and some of you are already going to be familiar. Some of you guys are already going to be familiar with this. Idi Amin. Idi Amin. Idiamin. Some of you older guys, I know Joey right now is like, oh, yes, we remember everyone's favorite dictator. Idi Amin. When you start looking at the revolutions, in so-called revolutions in the former European colonies in sub-Saharan Africa during the 70s and bleeding on into the 80s, emphasis on the word bleeding, Idi Amin was a tyrannical dictator who was brought to power to serve the corporate interests of the United States government. And like so many things, best laid plans, he eventually fell within the orbit of communism, Soviet communism, and of course the Chinese, who are making another play for the old European colonies in Africa. They got to him, and they changed everything. Idi Amin was a twisted freaking unit, man. Very, very twisted unit. How does all this tie into what we may be talking about? Well, there was a little place called Entebbe Airport. The Israeli commandos raided that to pull hostages off a hijacked plane that they had insisted land in Uganda under Idi Amin's rule because they thought they would find safety there. Idi Amin was known for torturous behavior. He was a sadist. He was a sadist by any reasonable definition, and in the truest sense, a complete sadist. One incident he was known for was having one of his political rivals imprisoned, pulling him out of that prison, beheading him, and then keeping his decomposing head as a centerpiece on his dinner table, and he would eat his meals while lecturing and screaming and cursing at the severed head of his former political rival. December 73. If you get a chance, I'm just going to throw this out here for cinematic reference. If you get a chance, you want to see Forrest Whitaker in The Last King of Scotland. If you want to get a taste for exactly how twisted this guy was, and you don't have the stomach to do a deep dive on the blood and the gore and the war and all of the horrible stuff that was done in the name of his eventually communist insurgencies there, you need to see Last King of Scotland. It's a really jaw-dropping film, and Forrest Whitaker does a phenomenal job of portraying Idi Amin. The Last King of Scotland, again, it's this guy was so nuts, man. You're really gonna have to dig deep. But he started claiming royalty in all these other places. He started claiming royal dominion over places within the European powers that had previously supported him once he aligned himself with the Soviet Union. The Common Man's Charter. There were 80 British companies that were doing business when he made the shift. And this is something you can always see when you have these so-called, people's revolutions, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and particularly in that time period. The Common Man's Charter, where there were 80 British companies, and this is something that's common among the Western powers in that time period. They continue to do it to this day. It's just now the Chinese are doing it more frequently, more thoroughly, and arguably way better. By the time the Chinese are done with sub-Saharan Africa, they will beg to have the Europeans back. It is horrible what is about to befall these people, but that is the way in sub-Saharan Africa. It's another day that ends in the letter Y for these folks, tragically. In any case, there were 80 British companies and a couple dozen United States companies that were doing business in Uganda, doing the typical thing. These sub-Saharan African countries have all these resources, and they're not doing a damn thing with them. Again, that's a whole other rant, and you already know where I'm at with regard to no cultural equivalencies and why the West is what the West is and why Africa is what Africa is. That's a rant for another day. But in any case, as was typical, the Western powers were doing business there, and in the popular revolution, of course, funded and pushed by Soviet communists and Chinese communists, the popular revolution sweeps Idi Amin into power, and he immediately nationalizes those businesses. What does this have to do with anything? Well, again, it's a pattern, and it's been well established. If you look at Mohammad Mossadegh, who was democratically elected in Iran in 1953, he made a move to nationalize the oil fields. And what happened? Immediately, the CIA instituted a coup against him and brought Shah Reza Pahlavi to power the Shah of Iran, who ran a secret police that was just horrible, etc., etc., etc. It is the same pattern repeating itself. Idi Amin was a brutal dictator. Everybody knew that he was a brutal dictator, that he was a murderer, that he was a cannibal, that he was probably diddling kids. Everybody knew these things, but the power structure, the deep state, which of course doesn't exist, had no problem with such a man being in power so long as he was playing to Western interests. Once he turned coat and went to the other side, we did what we always do and institute coups against him and start funding his rivals. This is the nature of the deep state / the war machine that Eisenhower warned us about. But Amin's particular place in the history of that region and in the history of the Bush Wars and the internecine revolutions, internecine, that's my college word, I got like 3 of those, that took place in the 70s and bleeding on through to the 80s as the Europeans turned their backs, as the Europeans refused to support any of their former colonies or the white European establishments that existed therein. Rhodesia, I'm looking at you. Rhodesia, yeah, we don't use the Z word in my house, Sparky. Never going to happen. And of course, the horrible apartheid regime of South Africa. Don't even get me started on what the ANC has done to that place since the European powers left. In any case, he is a fascinating individual in a fascinating piece of history, if for no other reason than the sheer scope of his brutality. You should do a deep dive on Idi Amin, at least deep enough to see the Forrest Whitaker movie, The Last King of Scotland. You should see it. But nothing is going to give you the real perspective that a deep dive will when you look to folks like Idi Amin, in the same time period, his contemporaries like Mobutu Sese Seko, and all of the other essentially tribal warlords, better dressed than most, but essentially tribal warlords. And it was the warlord that replaced the other warlord. Who was going to represent the Western interest? Who was going to represent the communist interest while we were sold a bill of goods that they were representing the interests of the people? Does any of this sound vaguely familiar with what's going on right now? If you don't know your past, you don't know your present. If you don't know your present, you have no perspective on what they are trying to push for your future. So Idi Amin, do that deep dive, look into his background, look into his life, his history, the way he ascended through the ranks of essentially just a primitive, brutal warlord type military. And because he was the most brutal, because that's typically how it works out, he rose to the top. The most evil, the most brutal rise to the top in that sort of culture. He rose to the top, and then the powers that were above him started reminding him that you are not, you are the top dog in this context, but we are above you. And don't have any illusions, as I'm fond of saying, about the God that you serve. And he tried to serve more than one God when it came to the politics of the whole thing. Yes, he murdered his own son and ate part of him. Yes. Get it. Dennis, I knew I could count on you. John Goldsmith, I apologize for the tardiness from the backwoods of central Montana doing my annual protein shopping. John, I wish I could have been up there in time to join you. I've got a couple of old rifles that I'd love to run some rounds through and fill that freezer. In the meantime, I'm looking for a new one with which I can go out and do that little protein shopping thing with you maybe one of these days. But, John, I will be back about a week, a little over a week. So, and, of course, the holiday smoked bird is going to be there. Other parties who have been at previous Thanksgivings will not, owing to idiocy and inability to control their cannabis urges. Anyway, I'll spare you the rant, but you're welcome on Thanksgiving. We'd love to see you. And Mike is looking out. John, you will love this. Mike is looking out for the house now. So it'll be like old times, buddy. Looking forward to that. So again, Idi Amin and the Last King of Scotland, movie, Idi Amin. That is your rabbit hole for the week. Decided to pull a historical figure and a historical period out of our butts. Sunday sermon, 5 November 2023. I'm going to roll the ticker down at the bottom. That is the rest of my social media for you guys who are not aware of it. And you know what? There is another banner that I'm going to do because this is easy enough to establish. You know what date it is and you know that I'm doing a sermon. But I'm going to post my email address, okay? Because a lot of people don't want to reach out to me through social media, and a lot of people want to type up a long and burning missive, particularly since this thing kicked off between Israel and Gaza, to tell me if and why they believe I am wrong in my assessment of what is going on over there, of what it means to be God's church as opposed to God's chosen people, this sort of thing. There are people out there that feel like I'm getting it wrong, and I know it by their silence. There is no need for that silence. I'm posting my email address right here, and I want you to use that. If for whatever reason you think that my assessment of anything, not just Gaza, but anything, is wrong, incorrect, and you want to plead that case, I would love for you to plead that case. So hit me up with a long email. I promise you, man, even if I think you're 100% wrong, if you are coming from a place of honesty and you are hitting me with facts, not emotion-based drivel, but fact-based argument, I will entertain it, man. As I'm constantly reminding myself, and as I'm constantly pointing out to people here, walking in the light, the number one command from the boss man and the carpenter kid is to walk in truth. Sometimes that truth can be unflattering to circles that we run with. There was a post earlier this week on a friend's thread that went into that of how, and this, I'm sorry, letter of the statement, he was absolutely correct about hell is created by religion to maintain control. Okay. That's true. The only issue that I took with it was that it was created by religion. Hell, in my estimation, is just separation from God, or before I was on that path, separation from truth. That's hell. Excruciating pain and torment, getting what your life maybe deserves or what some people would not agree that it deserves. That has been a tool of religion. But this brings us to the number one bullet point about the importance of distinctions and definitions and specificity. That's my college word. I got like 3 of those. Distinctions between doctrine and theory versus practice with regard to fear being applied. A number of people ask me, both on social media and in person, what are your thoughts on the church doing this? Or are you proud? Are you proud of what the church did on this thing? Don't get it twisted, man. My walk is with the boss man and the carpenter kid. Church is a construct. There are some that resonate. There are some that still speak the truth, preach the gospel as ordained, or as they have, who are not adapting just to suit a bigger audience. That is something that I can get behind. But as far as religion, and it's looking like we're about to lose Wi-Fi soon. I hope not, but all right. Yeah, we're about to lose Wi-Fi again. All right, it's tentative. And of course, the second I go getting deep about something, that's always when it seems to right. So I'm gonna try to refrain from all the gestures because there's gonna be a lot of freezing and things like that. So try to stick with me on the audio. Theory versus practice Doctrine versus practice. Things that are true versus things that are facts that don't lead you to truth. We've gone on about this before, something that Brother Sonny is fond of bringing up. That just because you are presenting facts does not mean that you are presenting truth. In fact, facts are just as often used to deceive and misdirect. Sometimes there is a hierarchy of where facts become truth or where facts lose perspective on truth. For example, take take a random statement. All religions are equally violent. False. Utterly false. All religions are equally violent. Too basic a statement, a complete lack of specificity. That statement in and of itself is utterly false by any measure. All religions are equally violent. Okay. All Western religions are equally violent. Also false. Um, all Abrahamic religions are equally violent. Now we're presenting facts that still aren't getting us any closer to the truth because of the distinction that needs to be drawn between theory, doctrine, and practice. All Abrahamic religions are equally violent in theory and in doctrine. One can certainly make a case for that, whether we are talking about Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. What is the Old Testament to Christianity? That was the Jewish Bible for all intents and purposes. Yes, I know we can snivel, leave it. You know the point that I'm trying to get across. The three of you who are like, "Hey, man, wait. Let me see what." Kierkegaard again. Maybe, and it's good that you brought that up. For those that missed it the first time around, Soren Kierkegaard, drew a distinction between being a follower of Christ and being an admirer of Christ. Again, important distinctions. Theory versus practice. And what was the Mike calls most Christians? I mean, most call you cafeteria Christians. They go through and nitpick from Scripture and practice what makes them feel good. And that's a completely valid point. That is a completely valid point because there is a whole lot of cherry picking. As I've stated before, the people who are the evangelical atheists are just as guilty. They quite correctly condemn those cafeteria Christians for going through and cherry picking scripture. We're going to follow this part of the scripture because this suits our preconceived notion, our preconceived narrative, our preconceived worldview, but we're going to ignore all this other part that tells us how screwed up we are for feeling this way and acting this way. Yes, I get it. In the same way that science, TM, as a religion for the evangelical atheists, they quite correctly slag on cafeteria Christians for doing that. But getting back to the scripture, they can point out the speck in our eye while ignoring the log in their own. Because when you hit them with science, oh, they love it. They'll cherry pick the scripture about virology and they'll cherry pick the scripture about climate and they'll cherry pick, but racial and ethnic and cultural differences in intelligence. Scientifically proven fact, but try waving the bell curve in front of some people. Not too fond of it. Of course, the fallback there is like, well, yeah, you're talking about phrenology. No, I'm not. I'm talking about legit data, irrefutable. But you don't like to talk about that. How about basic biology with regard to gender issues? Don't want to talk about that either. So if you're going to correctly criticize the Christians for cherry picking scripture, don't first of all. I kind of got off the beaten path there, which was totally out of character for me. Where was I? All Abrahamic religions are equally violent. In doctrine, yes. Yes. Absolutely. I would say that is pretty much irrefutable. If you look at the Old Testament, let's start with Leviticus. That's the easy one. If you reach back into Leviticus, just look at the slew of things that were verboten to the Jews at the time and would ultimately be forbidden to Christians as the religion evolved. Okay? Things that you could be put to death for. Men lying with other men. Gay sex, you're dead. Eating shellfish, you're scourged. You're going to take scallops and shrimp away from me and on penalty of scourging. Kind of rough. But that was the doctrine. Islam, adulteress, stoned to death. By letter of the doctrine, even if a woman was a victim of rape, she could be stoned to death under the clause for adultery. Judaism, Christianity, Old Testament Christianity, which is basically Judaism. All of it in doctrine is equally violent. That's just a factual statement. But where it gets into facts, not leading you to the truth, this is where we have to take doctrine and theory and draw a distinction between that and practice. With all the stuff that's going on in the world, this is why this is boiling up in me now. When we take a look at all of the things that are going on in the world, particularly here in the States, as a response to the Israel-Gaza thing. There are a slew of people on both sides that seem incapable of finding their own ideological ass in the dark with both hands. Queers for Palestine. If you want a distinction between violent religions in doctrine and in theory and violent religions in practice, Queers for Palestine. Let's try that again. Palestine, where the so-called Palestinians democratically elected Hamas to lead. Hamas nation has ever walked the face of the earth. And a primary tenet is that in the world that they envision, and these are their own words, you can look this up, there will be no homosexuals. None. No homosexuals, no apostates, no infidels. You will all be put to death. Tell me again about all religions being equally violent in practice versus in doctrine. The Old Testament is basically the Jewish Bible. The New Testament, with Christ, which Judaism denies as the Messiah, talks about redemption and forgiveness. In fact, calls out a lot of the admonitions of the book of Leviticus and some of the things that are forbidden. It's a completely different perspective. Ah, George, glad you made it, buddy. Glad you made it. Just look at history. Yeah, David, without a doubt. So again, doctrine, oh yeah, they're all equally violent. That is a fact. But the statement, all religions are equally violent, not taking into account that distinction between doctrine and theory and practice. That is a factual statement that does not lead you to the truth. Y'all feel me? Y'all tracking on this one? Generally, When people fail to draw these distinctions, they fail on purpose to draw these distinctions because they are intentionally trying to mislead you. Minions of the deceiver, the father of lies. It is how they carry on. Okay, and that's an entirely fair. That's an entirely fair assessment. That's an entirely fair assessment. It is a faith-based argument, but listen to what I am saying. I am speaking with regard to the facts of the doctrine, how it is written, and how it is put into practice. And that is the distinction. I know you're tracking me on this. You may disagree, but I know you're tracking. When you present the factual statement, and that is a factual statement, that all religions are equally violent, when it comes to doctrine, if you are speaking with regard to doctrine, but you fail to draw the distinction between doctrine, theory, and practice, you are speaking a fact, but you are not speaking truth. Again, you may disagree, but I know you're tracking on this one. Queers for Palestine, getting back to it. Queers for Palestine. Okay. You realize you'd be put to death, right? There are no queers in Palestine, at least not open, that still have their heads or haven't been thrown off the sides of tall buildings. Okay. So this is incredibly stupid that a group like that even exists and could only exist in the West, could only exist in the West. And that is a factual statement, and that is truth. Nowhere else in the world could could such a ridiculous contradiction exist without being ridiculed right out of existence. First of all, in the places that you claim to support, your people are put to death. You think the LGBT community, particularly the trans community, has a hard time in the States? Cry me an effing river. Oh, you don't get first choice of who's going to bake the cake for your gay wedding. Wow, so oppressed. People are legally allowed to not use the pronouns that you have assigned to yourself. Meh. So, in your effort to strike back at your great oppressor in Western civilization, you take up the mantle of Gaza and the Palestinians. Queers for Palestine. They would kill you. How often do I have to keep going over this one in my advocacy that the West is God's highest expression on this planet when it comes to civilizations? Absolutely believe that. Absolutely without equivocation. How did that practice work out for the Welsh and the Visigoths? I'm sure the first Egyptians have an argument, but I digress. And yes, Brian, this is why I love you. A more of a coffee table conversation with regard to how you and I are going to discuss it. Realize that, okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Hang on. That's Wi-Fi connection. Martin Luther, the Catholic Church, put you to death for reading the Bible. But again, tell me how unbellicose Christianity is. Hey, no, bro. What you are speaking is at that juncture in history. At that juncture in history, yes, the violence of the religion in practice lined up with the violence of the religion in doctrine. It did. It absolutely did. So, if we are having this discussion in the 1400s, then yes, it stands to reason. As expressed in the modern world, not even close. The argument that is often presented to me, and the one, and Ryan, this isn't you, by the way, because you know better and you're familiar with the history of the Crusades, but the one that they always come back to me with is, well, what about the Crusades? And I'm like, first of all, I didn't realize we were having this argument in the 1400s, but even then, The Crusades were in response to Muslim aggression in the Holy Land. One could try to make the case that Israel's aggression is a response to Muslim aggression in the Holy Land. I would not agree with that case. Here's the truth: Hebrew people existed in that region thousands of years before Palestine. There has never been a Palestinian state. These are facts. But the truth on the ground, again, I can tell you these facts, but that doesn't get us any closer to the truth. The truth on the ground is that Israel is a completely secular state. The truth on the ground is that Judaism denies Christ. And yet, evangelical Christians here in the United States are ready to bleed because of what I feel is a misinterpretation of Scripture. I cannot be intellectually honest, and Ryan, you will appreciate this. I cannot be intellectually honest and poke fun at the obvious absurdity of Queers for Palestine without also calling out the complete absurdity of evangelical Christians for Israel. Christians for Israel, I see why you're making the case, but you're not doing the deep dive. You're not accepting, or perhaps you're conveniently overlooking for the sake of your narrative, the fact that the people you choose to defend are a secular state and that their doctrine denies the Lord that you claim to follow as the Messiah. In fact, from the Sanhedrins, from the Talmud that I read just a couple of weeks ago when we rehashed this discussion, in the Talmud, Christ burning in excrement, boiling in excrement forever as a false prophet. The fact that Ezekiel chapter 53 is pushed down and suppressed in Israel because it foretold the coming of Christ and described it right down to his scourging and his crucifixion. That's inconvenient for a group of people that denies him as the Messiah. And yet, evangelical Christians here in the United States feel deep down a moral obligation to support not Christ's people in Israel, not the nation, not even the Jews, but a secular state. How is that any less absurd than Queers for Palestine? Again, the distinction between theory and doctrine and practice. It would be just as absurd as me trying to say that Christianity is not a violent religion. Oh, hell yes, we are. Hell yes, we are. I'm not even going to reach back to the Crusades or for calling out Catholicism since we're on that subject. I'm not even going to reach back that far. The Crusades, the Inquisition, but then we got to flip that around. Segueing into the next bullet about false equivalencies. We are capable as a we are capable of We have and continue to justify violence and atrocity in the name of religion. But if we're going to generate the false equivalency, like sight of the distinct losing sight of the discrepancy between doctrine, theory, and practice, then we are engaged in intellectual dishonesty, which is something that I'm not going to abide. False equivalencies. Getting back to the doctrine that's being sold to us by the propaganda matrix right now. After the Hamas attacks, finally fessing up to the fact that we have terror cells. Without a doubt, we have radical Muslim terror cells operating inside the United States. They are training here. They are arming themselves here. They are literally walking among us day to day. And yet, the Atlantic, or one of those lefty rags, came out this week trying to draw the false equivalency that white Christian nationalism, which of course they're going to tie to the MAGA movement, that white Christian nationalism presents a bigger existential threat to representative government in the United States than Hamas not only does, but ever could. Their words, not mine. Their words, not mine. That's right up there on the absurdity level with for Palestine or evangelicals for Israel. And it's a damn hard thing to swallow when you look at it. Are we capable of great violence? Yes. Are there people who identify as Christians? Are there people who are true, legitimate followers of Christ? Getting back to Soren Kierkegaard, followers of Christ versus admirers of Christ, who do believe and are willing to rise up and fight a tyrannical government if it differs from the will of their Lord. Yes, those people exist. To try to draw the false equivalency between a defensive reaction, same as the Crusades, since we took it there, a defensive reaction. And again, Christians, I've called you out before and I will continue to call you out. We are not persecuted. Not by a damn sight, not yet. Is there a systematic effort to minimize, marginalize, dehumanize, demoralize? Absolutely. Are we oppressed yet? Not by a damn sight. You'll know it when we're oppressed. Take a look at the Muslim countries and what they've done to Christians there. In fact, Syria, our government chooses to work for regime change, is one of the few that actually tolerate Christianity. Assad is a secular leader, ostensibly Muslim. Point being is this: when you start drawing false equivalencies, drawing those false equivalencies, you are heading down a very, very dangerous road. And because the current regime has drawn these false equivalencies for so long, They are reaping the whirlwind because now it doesn't matter which side they support. We all know the stroke that the Israel lobby has on U.S. foreign policy. It is not any Semitic to say so. It is a factual statement. Again, facts not representing the whole truth, but it is a factual statement. IPAC has an inordinate amount of political control over United States foreign policy. They are the kingmakers. They can make or break any politician. They have their fingers inside our intelligence agencies. One could make a case that the Jeffrey Epstein thing was a Mossad blackmail operation before he didn't kill himself. They know exactly what they're doing. They have an inordinate stroke and inordinate power. And as a result, they have and continue to treat us as a client state. But unfortunately, the cadaver in chief crawled into bed with intersectionality and the radical left. He was the face. Decrepit, dementia riddled, addled cadaver, but he was the face. The regime is far left. You can sell Joe Biden as a moderate, an addled moderate, but the regime is far left. And because of that, there is a hatred for Israel. Now, I can understand how one can make a case for a hatred for the secular state of Israel. Believe me, I can totally understand that. Go in that hatred, no matter what your case is on. Enemies of the West that want you dead. Remember, their own words. Their own words. First, we get the Saturday people, then we come for the Sunday people. This is in their own manifesto. And again, we get back to the distinction between doctrine and practice. Show me a Christian country in the developed world that beheads homosexuals and stones to death apostates as a matter of state policy, and I'll shut right up. Don't go pulling Uganda out of your ass. Don't do it. The industrialized world, the developed world. But since we're there, how about those countries in sub-Saharan Africa where people proclaiming themselves to be Christians still commit acts of violent brutality in the name of the faith, in the name of the church? Are they just as violent in theory, in doctrine, and in practice? Yes, they are. That's a factual statement. So distinctions have to be drawn. Specificity counts. What about religion? I don't care about religion. My walk is with the Father through the Son. What fat suburban asses warming pews in gated communities have to say about anything does not affect my walk. If anything, it compels me to dig deeper to find the truths that these people are willing to conveniently ignore. But even then, here in the States, those people are not the violent threat. Suburban white churches, you're trying to create a moral equivalency, let alone a physical equivalency between them and radical Islamists here in the United States. Are you high? That southern border has been left open for a reason. You look at the refugees from Gaza, all of the Arab countries surrounding Gaza have refused to take them in. Egypt doesn't want them. Turkey doesn't want them. Jordan doesn't want them. Syria certainly doesn't want them. And again, Israel, who we've gotten behind, is attacking the airport in Damascus. Great job, guys. Way to win the hearts and minds. I digress. None of those Arab countries want those refugees from Gaza. Why? Because they know. Of course he is. But I wouldn't have been knocking on that door in the first place. I can preach circles around that man, and I'm actually a man of faith and not a motivational speaker, right? So, point being, none of those Arab countries want those Gaza refugees. Why? Because they democratically elected Hamas to represent them. Because everything that we have done with regard to humanitarian aid, we sent them pipes. We sent them pipes for water. They built rockets out of them. They build tunnel networks. They launch missiles into Israel from inside cemeteries and from inside hospital complexes. I'm not saying that Israel doesn't get plenty of joy and hasn't admitted as much, that they are just as genocidal against the so-called Palestinians as the Palestinians in most Muslim countries are against the Jews. There is an equivalency if you need to find one. Genocide has no side. You feel me? Also true. Yeah. Yeah. But my retort to that, Ryan, is it did turn out very, very badly. And in the end, he still walked in the truth, walked in the faith. Judas was 30 pieces of silver. You see me selling my soul for that, I deserve everything I have coming. May I continue? And you and I can have coffee over this one day. None of those countries want those Gaza refugees because they know that they are predatory miscreant scumbags that will unleash their Stone Age breed of hell anywhere they show up. So the Arab countries won't take them. Where do you suppose they're going to end up? Why do you think the regime is launching its incentive against Islamophobia? Don't you think it's a little tone deaf to do something like that right now when you're trying to sell us on the lie of fear? But this is where the narrative dies, and this is where the left is condemned to forever trip over their own bullshit. Intersectionality. You spend so much time pushing. Aren't these the same people that told us for the last 6 years that the religious right and particularly the MAGA crowd are crawling with anti-Semite Nazis that want to kill 6 million Jews? And we were horrible people for that fact. And now these are the same people who, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. Whether it's Nazis, whether it's Islamic radicals, they all meet at Jew hate junction, boys and girls. They all meet at Jew hate junction. And we can talk about that, and we have. But here's the point. Drawing false equivalencies. Failing to draw distinctions, first and foremost. Failing to draw distinctions between theory and doctrine and actual practice is the beginning of the lie. That lie feeds into the false equivalencies. And by the time it gets around to the truth, you are so clouded you don't know which way is up. I want you to ponder this for a minute. What do you think is more likely? If we go to war in the Middle East, which is a very realistic possibility right now, Iran has hit us with two. Joey, we're both going to hell. Me for making that up, and you for calling it a Schoolhouse Rock episode. That's hilarious. What do you think is more likely? Iran has hit 2 U.S. military bases with drone strikes now. Allegedly. Could be a false flag. Who knows? But the point is this. If we wind up going to war, even on a lie, against the Muslim world, what do you think is the more likely scenario? Some MAGA hat wearing hillbilly planting pipe bombs at a state capitol, or 24 sleeper cells that trained in Iran like Hamas and Hezbollah did before this attack against Israel, who have walked across our southern border, which they keep telling us is secure. What is more likely, that it's going to be a MAGA guy bombing a state capitol, or 24 sleeper cells all activating on the same day and laying waste to major chunks of our infrastructure? Which do you feel is more likely? So to draw that false equivalency that white Christian nationalists, and it's interesting that they phrase it that way, particularly with the again, we are not oppressed. Stop that. Stop that. Even with everything that Merrick Garland is doing, we are targeted. We are not oppressed. Not yet. You can't deny that the Garland DOJ has specifically targeted Christians. They have used the FBI to infiltrate Catholic churches to find radicals because that church was teaching the Latin Mass. It is undeniable, speaking of facts versus truth, it is undeniable that this current regime has targeted Christianity. We are not oppressed. Knock that off right now. We are not oppressed, just like the T community or the L's, the G's, and the B's. They are not oppressed. Not in the West. Not in the West, son. You're going to be hard pressed to convince me of oppression of any sort in any industrialized Western nation as a result of Western civilization and all that it has given the world. You're going to be very hard pressed. No one is oppressed. Shut up. Stop it. It's nonsense. But again, drawing distinctions. Theory versus practice. Are we targeted? Certainly. That's undeniable. Has radical Islam been largely given a pass in the name of political correctness for at least the last 10 years? Absolutely. Look no further than Bo Bergdahl, how he was hailed as a hero until the facts came out and how that casually got buried and he was booted out of the military. And then once Biden came back into power, he's actually suing to get back pay and get his military rank restored. Look it up. How about the Fort Hood shooter who was in contact with radical imams? This is a United States Army officer who was in contact with some of the most radical imams on the planet, openly discussing death to infidels, every other thing, and the military was aware of it and did nothing until he popped the cork. Don't tell me, A, that radical Islam has not been given a pass due to political correctness and speech codes and every other damn thing, that this is not an act of intent. And don't tell me that the Merrick Garland Justice Department isn't specifically targeting Christians. Welsh band, I'm sure they're taking the shout out. I hope so, man. Tell them to send me an MP3. Maybe we'll make it the closing bumper music, man, and just kind of cycle out that clutch. I love you, Ryan. Point being, we cannot allow these false equivalencies to be drawn. Are there Christians within the United States who are ready to die for their beliefs? Absolutely. Are there Christians in the United States who, if pressed, if they felt that the government had completely flipped, and you could nearly make a case for that where we're at right now, that they would take violent action against the government? Yes. Is that as prevalent as radical Islamists who seek, as a matter of doctrine, and act as a matter of practice in a way that seeks to undermine and destroy the West? It's not even close. Don't pull the Crusades out of your ass. Don't pull the Inquisition out of your ass. In the modern world, the body count and the violence in practice, as opposed to the violence in doctrine, aren't even close. And speaking with regard to these, boiling it down to the three Abrahamic religions, leaving aside everything else, leaving aside the Northern European pagan religions, leaving aside Eastern mysticism and Hinduism and Shintoism, all of that, leaving that aside, completely leaving that aside. You can make the case that Judaism, particularly the secular nation of Israel right now, is using doctrine as an excuse for inexcusable practice. You can make that case. The only way that you can make that case with Christianity is if you say that the United States is a Christian nation. No one on the left will concede that. Am I equivocating? I don't feel like I am. I feel like I am making observations. But again, that's what you're here for. I'm going to offer you the truth as I see it. And you know that I have thought it through. If it's emanating from my face, that I've thought it through and that I'm giving you the truth as I best understand it, with the admonition that you follow up and do the required homework. I am not a guru. I am a fat, toothless cripple, a crane operator with some opinions. That's it. You got to put in the work, son. And if we disagree, I'm happy to have that conversation. Here's what I will not abide. Here's what I will not tolerate. Ideological inconsistency and intellectual cowardice. And there's more than enough of both to go around right now. Bringing me to my third bullet point about dying stars and dying narratives. You've heard me touch on this before. And if it sounds like a rehash, well, okay, fine, tune me out. You don't have to sit through it. We have been sold Orwellian doublethink for years by the left. Right-wing Christian nationalists are the true anti-Semites, secret Nazis that want to kill 6 million Jews until Palestine, so-called, and Hamas launch a terror attack against Israel, and then college campuses come alive with people literally calling for the extermination of Jews. At which point, the same left that sold it that all MAGA people are Nazis, MAGA, the president that finally moved our embassy to Jerusalem, but I digress, that we were all Nazis, and that anything that we said with regard to Israel or foreign policy needed to be deplatformed, needed to be suppressed. And now their own team literally calling for the extinction and extermination of Jews. And when asked if actions are going to be taken by the state, which, for the record, I am a free speech absolutist, they can say every bit of this. There should be no state action, none, with regard to any of this. I want to be abundantly clear on that. Having said that, when asked if the state is going to take any action, as they did on their own accord, deplatforming conservatives, deplatforming MAGA, working directly with Twitter and other social media platforms to deplatform us for utterances that didn't fit the politically correct narrative when it comes to Jews, we were deplatformed. These college activists literally projecting in light on the side of walls, on buildings, on U.S. college campuses, calling for the extermination of Jews. And when we go to ask the government, hey, are you going to intervene here? Their word is, well, it's free speech. The ideological inconsistency, as I was stating before, it's dying. The entire narrative is dying. We're winning in Ukraine and we're going to stick it out there and all of that money is well spent. That is coming, that it's coming apart. It's coming apart. Zelensky's own people are saying, look, dude, you need to sue for peace right now. What is ultimately going to happen on that? I'm just going to touch on this real briefly. I called it from the beginning. They're going to give Putin the Donbass region, and it's going to be over with. None of this had to happen. That's my prediction. Let me move on. The propaganda machine keeps spewing the lies, even as the evidence of our own eyes and ears becomes so overwhelming that no amount of propaganda ministry is going to be able to convince anyone but the most ideologically retarded, the most slavishly devoted to the regime and to the narrative. No one else is buying it. Zelensky is getting his ass handed to him. We have spent almost $200 billion on aid to Ukraine, most of which went to defense contractors, the rest of which was taken by Ukrainian corruption, which I told you was going to happen in the very beginning. Everybody bought it. Everybody bought it because they never met a war they didn't like. Putin bad. Putin bad. Putin bad. 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 Yeah. They bought it. It's coming unraveled. They can't hide it anymore. They tried to assure us that Biden had no connection to his son and his son's business dealings. They literally worked with Twitter and other social media platforms to kill that story before the election. And now, even CNN and MSNBC can't defend them. They tried to say that we were still down for Israel and not beholden to Muslim powers, and that's fallen apart now. Tried to say that our withdrawal from Afghanistan wasn't going to disturb the power balance in the Arab world, that those weapons weren't going to be. And guess what showed up? Being funneled through Iran to Hezbollah and Hamas militants. Guess what happened? Oh, our own weapons that we left behind in Afghanistan. The narrative is dead. But here is the danger of that dying narrative, because a dying narrative is like a dying star, a dying ideology, particularly one that is dying under the weight of its own lies. It's like a dying star in one very important sense. What do we know about dying stars? Dennis, feel free to jump in, science nerd. They get smaller and they get smaller and they get smaller and more compressed and more dense and more compact. And as they become more and more dense and compact, the heat. There are a couple of possible outcomes. One, it can vanish under the weight of its own gravity. But the other, as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and more compact and more dense in every sense of the word, and hotter, it could also reach a point, boom, where it goes supernova. That is the danger of a dying star, and it is the danger of a dying narrative. It is the danger of a dying ideology with regard to the left. They were big and bold, and they at least had the illusion of the numbers. 80 million, if we were to believe the official account. And as the parts of the narrative start to fall apart, the narrative starts to collapse under its own weight. And the ferocity and tenacity of the people that defend the narrative and defend the regime, they become smaller, fewer in number, but more intense and therefore more dangerous. They are content to let the entire machine collapse in on itself and explode rather than admit that they are wrong. Dying stars and dying narratives are dangerous for almost exactly the same reason. Dying narratives and dying ideologies, they are dangerous for almost the exact same reason. And we are at a point where that ideology and that regime is an infinitely white and dense dot. I pray. Hey, you're waiting under a bridge for three Billy goats, you freaking troll. Anyway, I guarantee, even though I pray, I don't think there's a chance of it happening, that it collapses under its own weight and disappears. I don't think there is a single chance of that happening because it is too hot now and too dug in. And unlike a dying star, this one has human will and malicious intent and the wretched stench of lies at its core, making it infinitely more dangerous. They are fully prepared to bring the whole thing down rather than let go of their control. You know, Dan Bongino brought this up, and I agree. I want you to think about everything that the regime has done, from leaving our weapons behind in Afghanistan to the disastrous nature of the withdrawal to leaving the border wide open for fentanyl and human trafficking to depleting our strategic oil reserves and selling some of that to our chief rival, China, and giving away all our blood and treasure to Ukraine and sending them all the munitions we have to where our stocks are running dangerously short. I want you to ponder all of those actions that the regime has taken. Ponder them all and ask yourself, if Biden, again, not Biden, he's not making the calls, if the regime were intentionally looking to undermine this country, is there anything that they would do differently? Would there be any more effective way of doing it without giving away the farm and admitting, hey man, look, we're looking to undermine, we're going to crash the whole system now. Screw America. China's going to win, radical Islam, whatever. The West is dead, old white men, blah, 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 intentionally trying to do that. Would they do anything differently? Skip the red giant phase. Shut up. The hell? Oh, this is ridiculous. Wi-Fi is becoming a little overwhelming, guys. I'm not going to cut it short, but I think I've made the point. That dying star and that dying narrative runs a very, very big risk because they are more than willing to crash it all. They will continue to do it by selling fear, by selling lies, by selling false equivalencies, by failing to draw the distinction between doctrine, theory, and practice. It's what they do. It's what they've always done. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I wasn't going to. I was going to duck out without it. Rush fans are insufferable. The only fan base more insufferable than Rush fans are Tool fans. And that's debatable. Rush fans are utterly insufferable people. I know because I am one. Not only am I a fan of Rush, and Neil, if you're still on board, feel free to jump in on this one. I am a fan of the Signals/Grace Under Pressure era. Couple of albums which even the most devout, you know, no, actually, he will admit it, Turtle. He will gladly admit it because I love Tool as well. Absolutely love Tool, but as a general rule, their fan base is completely insufferable. They really are. They can't just appreciate. They can't just appreciate the music and the gift. They have to assign some elaborate mystical quality to every word that emanates forth, and they will try to out obscure each other. Well, did you know that, with the thing, like here they're using sacred geometry and the Mandelbrot said to do this thing, and when yeah, but on this one Rush album, that thing when he said that was like a reference to this other thing that was like there, and it showed like the depth of this, and it was like, man, there's just so many levels, man. You can't possibly appreciate it the way I do. It's those guys. I'm not those guys. I strive not to be those guys. I shun those guys. I appreciate Neil's lyrical brilliance for what it was, just like I appreciate Maynard's genius for what it is, right? I don't need to always show King Crimson videos from the 80s to Tool turds and shut them up. Right on, right on. I like that. I appreciate it for what it is. I don't need to assign any mystical quality to it. But I think lyrically, my favorite song, again, coming off that, I loved the Signals album and the Grace Under Pressure albums. Even the most insufferable Rush fans will likely make the case that that was just a low point. A lot of people, hardcore Rush fans, really dog out the Signals era. I love those two albums. I thought they were great. Um, and on one of those two albums, off the Signals album, track called "The Weapon," part two of the Fear trilogy, which Neil wrote Witch Hunt on the Moving Pictures album. And again, I'm not gonna turn into that Rush fan. I'm not gonna do it. But it was part two of a trilogy. And then because Rush, Neil added a fourth part to a trilogy. But I'm going to read these lyrics because in the current climate, I feel like they apply and I feel like they resonate. And I think about it often. But I had not listened to the album for a very long time. And the other day, I was scrolling through my iPod and I was just like, you know what, man, I'm going to give this a listen. And boom, it still hit just as hard as it did. We've got nothing to fear but fear itself. And again, all of these are with question marks. Not pain or failure, not fatal tragedy, not the faulty units in this mad machinery, not the broken contacts and emotional chemistry. This speaks to me about the propaganda ministry. With an iron fist and a velvet glove, we are sheltered under the gun. And in the glory game on the power train, thy kingdom's will be done. That iron fist and that velvet glove. We have come to depend on the comforts that are brought to us by the civilization which we inhabit without questioning. And in those wars for empire, we have become the iron fist and the velvet glove. Nothing wrong with that. If that is how you choose to carry yourself. But that iron fist in that velvet glove has been turned against those who count on to provide that security and to provide the physical sustenance for the continuation, for the core of Western civilization to continue to prosper, and it has been turned against us. In fact, some would say that that iron fist is smashing the West from the inside out, but we don't notice because of the velvet glove. Can any part of life be larger than life? Even love must be limited by time, and those who push us down that they might climb. Is any killer worth more than its crime? Like a steely blade in a silken sheath, we don't see what they're made of. They shout about love, but when push comes to shove, they live for the things that they're afraid of. Encapsulates a lot of what pervades the cultural zeitgeist of the West right now. About love. Shout about love. But when push comes to shove, they live for the things that they're afraid of. I'm not going to do a deep dive on the whole song, but the lyric that follows that, I think at some point I'm probably going to get tattooed somewhere, even if that does make me the insufferable Rush fan. And the knowledge that, that is a weapon, the knowledge that they fear is a weapon to be used against them. What better means of control than fear? And what is our chief fear going forward? We are afraid of knowing. We are afraid of truth. We are afraid of digging deeper for truth because it might upset our preconceived narrative. It's not just the left, boys and girls. Particularly with this Israel thing, there are a lot of people on the right that are afraid to look deeper, that won't take a look at Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, that won't take a look at any of the things that the Talmud says about their chosen Messiah. There are plenty on the right that are fighting it too. For the Queers for Palestine crowd, coming to the realization that these people that they defend with their rhetoric that would just as soon kill them, what a thing to come to grips with. That is knowledge. It is knowledge. The truth shall set something. The truth shall help me out. Yeah, the truth shall oh yeah, set you free. But it is that very knowledge that they fear. There is no truth on this earth that I would not wish known to the entire world, says Thomas Jefferson. I'm gonna remember you said that, honey, says Sally Hemings. Knowledge, acceptance of reality, queers for Palestine. You lock a queer in a hotel room with a Palestinian, what do you get? You lock a queer in a hotel room with a Palestinian, what do you get? A survived Palestinian. as opposed to what happens when you lock a Jew and a homosexual in a hotel room for a month. You know what you get then? A musical. Okay, I'm going to hell for that. I'm sorry. I couldn't. Yeah, that was. Yeah, that was poorly timed. That was poorly timed. Just a little levity. Just a levity on the way. Here's the thing: knowledge. Knowledge. It is the knowledge that they fear that is a weapon to be used against them. The knowledge. We cannot be afraid of knowledge. We cannot be afraid of truth. You like that? You like that, Mark? The musical? You like a Jew and a homosexual in a motel room. You get a musical. Anyway, I'm sorry. I love that joke. I freaking love that joke. Knowledge. When the carpenter kid came to me, I was punking for my cowardice. It was not the truth that he lit into me over. Correctly called me out for being a coward. Why? Because I had prided myself, keyword pride, on a guy that would follow truth no matter where it led him. I am courageous. I am bold. I will follow the truth no matter where it leads. And here his truth was right there in front of me, and it had been calling to me for years. And I was a coward because that truth might have led me in a direction that would force me to re examine everything that I considered myself about. And actually looking to walk in truth. I had to follow it no matter where it led Christ, led me to the foot of the cross. Knowledge that I feared. And since we've already established that the father of lies is who's squarely in control of this culture, it was the knowledge that I feared that was a weapon to be used against me. But Bart, if you really look into it, if you confess Christ, what is this going to mean for you? What about your friends? What about your family? What about am I seriously looking to walk in truth, or am I not? Because if that is the truth that is presenting itself in front of me, and I won't call it simply because of the corollary effects that it might have on everyone else, then I'm not truly seeking truth, am I? I'm doing the same thing that cafeteria Christians do with the scriptures. I'm doing the same thing that evangelical atheists. If I am not walking in truth, I am cherry picking the parts that fit my narrative. That is not walking in truth. That is, in fact, the very nature of cowardice. And intellectual cowardice, in particular, is something that I will no longer abide. So go forward in pursuit of truth in the absence of fear. Those of you who are friends of faith, give your fear to Christ. Hold your fear for God. Give your fear to Christ. For those of you who are of a secular nature or of a different faith, Let your balls drop. Embrace the honesty, no matter how brutal it may turn out to be. Do not let the knowledge that you fear become a weapon to be used against you. Walk in truth. The strength of that truth will follow, and that strength will ultimately set you free. I'm going to close with a prayer before we totally lose Wi-Fi here. Father God, who is the source of all truth and light in this world, who has given your Son to be scourged, tortured, and brutally murdered, that we could be washed in the blood, to pay for our redemption, to redeem the irredeemable. Cannot fathom the strength of that sacrifice. And I come before you, as always, praying for strength. And above all, discernment and clarity, discernment and clarity, discernment and clarity. To be able to speak your word, live your will. To be a vessel for the Holy Spirit to communicate to people, to reach people. And I ask if there is anyone out there who is struggling, Lord, struggling with the truth, struggling with their faith, struggling with life, that you touch their heart. Touch their heart. That you let my words reach these people and touch their heart and bring them home. They can find the comfort and the strength in that redemption. That they have no illusions about either the God that they serve and his very vengeful aspect, as well as his loving aspect, and that they have no illusions about the fight that we have coming. Give us all that clarity and discernment, Lord, and ultimately, on the appointed day, give us the strength. Fight with valor, and if it is your will, to die with honor. Some of us may not have a glorious death. It's not in your plan. Let us die well, standing up, speaking your truth. For the ones that are going the distance, give us the strength to endure, Lord. I ask your blessings on everyone here, and the struggles that we know of and struggles that we do not. And remember your admonition from the Latin, omnia ad regnum, omnia ad regnum. Everything, Lord, everything for the kingdom. Pray in the name of the risen Christ. Amen. I'm the Reverend. That is the gospel. I hope that last bit wasn't too choppy. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. Again, the next time I see you, it will be with a better Wi-Fi connection. I'm going to do what I always do here at the end. If anything that I had to allow touched you in any kind of way, did anything for you, shaped your worldview, put a little poke into your bread oven, gave you something to think about, gave you some recommended reading that'll be on your Kindle watch list for the week, I'm going to pass around that digital collection plate, man. I'm on Cash App, I'm on PayPal, I'm on Venmo, I'm on Facebook Pay, you name it, I'm on it. But ultimately, I realize we are still reluctantly living in a Biden economy. Not everybody can, not everybody will. But here's what you can do for me, man. Maybe not this broadcast because the quality's a little. Once we get back on it and this chop goes away, post it to your social media. And as always, here's what you can do, not just for me, but for yourself. As Mike is fond of reminding everyone to live. I'll do with right now. You got to have that signal to cut. They will try to bury you with the Simple as that. Signal that breaks through the noise. You got to be that light that breaks through the darkness. But above all, you got to be that strength, man. You got to be that strength in a world full of weakness. Because without the strength, man, none of the rest of it matters. You won't be able to push that signal through the noise. You won't be able to take that light and break through the darkness. They'll try to demoralize you, dehumanize you, emasculate you. You have to be strong. Not just here, but here, and here. So have that strength, guys. Live the three. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. Appreciate you guys being here. See you next Sunday, and hopefully we'll have better signal. In the meantime, in between time, thanks all y'all for coming out. I love you, man. I love you. Going to be wrapping up that shutdown. Should be back in Spokane, not next weekend, but the following weekend. We'll have in better connection, in studio guests, whole bit. It'll be great. I love you guys. Thank you for everything, man. Thank you for everything. God bless you all, man. See you next Sunday, man. Thank you very much for everything. Peace. God bless.